Hello, my fellow engineers. I realise it's been a while since I've posted a video. Just been enjoying the relaxing of lockdown here in the UK and taking the opportunity to get out of the house, seeing friends and family. I hope you're all staying safe out there. Today I wanted to discuss Python protocol, and more specifically the formatting of your Python code. We'll also look at a couple of tools you can use to automate this process for you, because we all love automation. So what is Python protocol? Is it following best practice, like following the PEP8 style guide, for example? Which is a code convention. It's a living document that evolves with the changes in Python. Or is it just following the Zen of Python, which is a short list of principles for Python coding? Neither of these enhancement proposals covers everything, but by design they're also pretty flexible. Another point is, should you be opinionated on this? Is there any allowance for personal preference when you code? Is there even a right or wrong way to code? So long as it runs as expected and there are tests, do you value efficiency over aesthetics and readability? There are so many questions, and I'm fairly sure we could discuss this until Python becomes legacy. Me and my team were discussing the way that we code, and some of the inconsistencies that crop up across our code bases. Each of us brought up what we thought was a nice way of formatting our code. One thing that we all agree on is that it's all about consistency. From functions and classes to the way that we write our tests, as long as we're all on the same page, we can start focusing on more important things, which brings me to why we do it. Why do you even want a Python protocol? When you review code, you don't want your focus to be drawn to style comments rather than focusing on the feature that you and your team are creating and the coverage in your tests. Having a consistent style across code bases actually makes your code more readable. Once the protocol becomes second nature, developers can start to focus on the function. Also, let's be fair, consistent code bases are nice to look at. So what do? Well, we do use PEP8 and PEP20, the Zen of Python. They're a good base, and if you're using linting, you'll need to conform to PEP8 anyway. Some of the rules we've set out are as follows. Module docstrings contain a detailed description of the module and potential examples if they're needed. Our imports follow PEP8, with standard modules first, followed by third-party and then application level. When we import multiple dependencies from the same module, we wrap them in parentheses, adding a comma at the end so that GitHub recognizes any new changes as a single line rather than removal and replacement. Global variables are in all caps, and variables are descriptive of the data they contain, as are all other variables as well. If we have a single exception in the module, then we'll store it in the same file, but if there are several, we create a separate file and import from them. It avoids the clutter. We're currently using Python 3.7, so for our functions we also include type hinting for variables and an expected return. We also make our functions as descriptive as possible. With these two criteria, we can forego a docstring in some functions. We also set multiple variables of a function on new lines, in this format here. This is because if you change the name of the variable, you can end up with your variables quite far towards the line character limit. For example, if your function looked like this, and say you wanted to change the name of your function because you've added some new functionality to it. If you start adding more to the name, what you can see here is that suddenly the functions are pushed way over, and it's not as readable as it could be. If a function has any exception handling, then it must have a docstring explaining what the exceptions are and why they're needed. Logging of said exceptions are also needed. If you use data frames, then they should also have their columns explained. Finally, some smaller things. Dictionaries should have a key value on each line and a comma at the end. We feel it reads well. We try to keep list creation Pythonic, i.e. list comprehension. If it doesn't fit on a single line though, we do create a for loop. And for our logging, we use f strings rather than %s. We feel it's a bit nicer to look at for a smaller amount of logged variables. However, we've given a bit of flexibility to use %s for a large amount of variables. Otherwise, these log messages can start to look a little bit cluttered. As software engineers, once we've solved a recurring problem, we try to automate it, and I believe Python protocol should be no different. I've actually come across a couple of libraries that you can use to help format your code. Firstly, there is Black. It's simple to use, but has very little configuration. They like to say, they're opinionated, so you don't have to be. To use Black with pipenv, you actually have to type pipenv run pip install Black. For some reason, pipenv doesn't pick up this library directly, and if anyone can tell me why, I'd love to know. Up here I've actually created a file to be formatted. I've added a couple of things that wouldn't quite pass our Python protocol that we've set. And just to give an example of how Black works, you can run it like the following. So you type pipenv run Black and then add the file name. And there you go, all done, one file reformatted. As you can see, the file has been formatted to how Black have set their standards. Some points to note though, is that it hasn't quite covered the Pepe import standard, though it has parenthesized the multiple imports. It's added a new line after a single line docstring, and it's listed all of the variables of a function on one line. It's set our dictionary key values to individual lines, and our list comprehension to one line as well. All in all, it's not done a bad job, and if you really don't want to be opinionated, then maybe this library is for you. The other tool for formatting I wanted to show you is called YAPF. It's a library from Google. YAPF is very configurable using what they call knobs in order to configure your Python format. You set them in a file called .style.yap, like the following. You can set your based on style. I've stuck with Pep8, but you can use things such as Google or even Facebook, for example. Then you add knobs like the following. I've set the brackets to dedent and also to have each dictionary entry on a separate line. One point to note about YAP is that it doesn't cover imports. They feel it's a bit too risky. However, you can use a library called isort to cover this problem. Isort covers your imports and sorts them so you don't have to. For isort and YAP, you can just add them to your dev packages inside your pip file to be installed. Coming back to the file to be formatted, the way that I've managed to get these tools to work to our Python protocol is as following. Firstly, you want to run isort. Then what you want to do is add a comma to the end of your imports here. This is so that YAP pick this up as a tuple and then dedents it. Then you need to run YAP using -i to do an in-place replacement of the formatting. As you can see, YAP has used the configuration that we set in the style.yap file and has dedented our brackets on our imports and our functions. It's also set our dictionary values on separate lines, and overall stuck to Pep8 in terms of our general style. I hope that's given you a little insight into how these tools can be used. I really do believe that Python protocol should be standardized so that as developers, we start to focus on the important things. As always, I'll leave the links to the tools in the description. Any questions, leave them in the comments below, and I'll catch you on the next one.